The air shimmered over the West Texas desert, warping the image of the fortress ahead. Helios Correctional. A private hell built to break the country's most violent men. And the grave they'd meticulously prepared for Zara Kenyatta. The transport van, its air conditioning failing against the relentless Texan sun, bounced over a cracked asphalt road that seemed to lead to nowhere. Inside, the heat was a physical presence, pressing down on Zara Kenyatta, sticking the rough fabric of her orange jumpsuit to her skin. The shackles on her wrists were slick with sweat. Through the reinforced mesh of the window, she watched the horizon, a flat, endless expanse of baked earth and pale, unforgiving sky. This was wrong. All of it. 3 weeks ago, she had been Dr. Zara Kenyatta, addressing a subcommittee at the Pentagon. Her voice, calm and precise, had methodically dismantled the fraudulent safety report submitted by Caruso Aerospace. She pointed to schematics, highlighted metallurgical failures in the alloy used for troop transport plating. To be clear, gentlemen, she had concluded, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces, these vehicles are not just defective, they are coffins on wheels. Sending soldiers into a conflict zone in them is a death sentence. Vincent Caruso, sitting in the front row, his face a mask of expensive composure, had met her eyes for a fraction of a second. In that flicker, she didn't see anger. She saw calculation. The look of a predator identifying a threat that needed to be neutralized. 2 weeks ago, she was reaching for a carton of milk in a grocery store. The next moment, a knee was in her back, her face pressed against the cold, grimy linoleum. Zara Kenyatta, you're under arrest for espionage and treason. The charge was absurd, theatrical. But the system had moved with terrifying speed. Her high-level clearances were used against her, twisted into evidence of foreign contact. The very knowledge that had allowed her to save lives was now the weapon used to condemn her. Her lawyer, a man with a sterling reputation, had been baffled. It's like fighting a ghost, Zara. Every piece of exculpatory evidence we find disappears. Every witness gets an anonymous threat. This is not a normal prosecution. This is a targeted removal. The verdict had been a foregone conclusion. Life in a maximum security federal facility, the judge had intoned, refusing to meet her gaze. Now, the van was slowing. Ahead, the structure solidified out of the heat haze. It wasn't a state-run facility. It was a monument to brutalist architecture and for-profit punishment. Helios Correctional. A privately owned prison known for its skeletal staffing, its high mortality rate, and its exclusively male population. Her blood ran cold. This is a mistake, she said, her voice raspy from dehydration. She spoke to the metal partition separating her from the guards. My transfer papers are for the Federal Women's Facility at Fort Worth. A tinny voice crackled back from a speaker. Paperwork says Helios, inmate. That's where you're going. This facility is for men. There has to be a clerical error. Not my problem, the voice replied, bored. You can file a complaint. Takes about 6 to 8 months to process. The van rolled through a gate topped with glistening razor wire. Towers manned by guards with sniper rifles tracked their progress. This wasn't a clerical error. This was an assassination, outsourced and privatized. Caruso hadn't just framed her, he had sentenced her to a specific, torturous death. Her mind, the same one that had planned dozens of covert operations in hostile territories, began to shift. The shock receded, replaced by the cold, familiar hum of tactical assessment. Analyze the terrain. Identify threats. Establish a defensible position. Survive. The van stopped in a sun-drenched courtyard that felt like the bottom of a kiln. The door slid open, and the heat hit her like a physical blow. A guard with a mirrored sunglasses and a cruel smirk stood silhouetted against the blinding light. Welcome to Helios, Kenyatta, he drawled. Hope you like the heat. As she stepped out, the heavy steel door of the van slamming shut behind her sounded like a tomb being sealed. The intake process at Helios was an exercise in systematic dehumanization. It was designed to strip away every shred of a person's past, leaving only a number and a body to be controlled. Zara's doctorate, her rank, her years of decorated service, they were all incinerated under the flat, indifferent gaze of the processing guards. Strip search, delousing shower, medical exam by a bored physician's assistant who noted her physical fitness with a flicker of surprise before stamping her file. Any history of violence? The intake officer asked, not looking up from his screen. Yes, Zara said, her voice even. That got his attention. He looked up. Elaborate. I was a commander in the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. The officer stared at her for a moment, then let out a short, humorless laugh. Right. And I'm Santa Claus. Put her down as standard. She was led to the office of the warden. The man, whose nameplate read Warden Styles, was soft and plump, an island of air-conditioned comfort in this desert hell. He reviewed her file on a large monitor, a faint, smug smile playing on his lips. Well, this is an unusual situation, inmate Kenyatta, he said, his voice smooth as oil. It seems there's been a significant clerical error in your placement. An error you need to correct immediately, Zara stated. I need to be placed in protective custody and transferred. Protective custody is for the weak, Styles said, leaning back in his leather chair. And it's full. As for the transfer, the bureaucracy moves at its own pace. We'll sort it out. Eventually. For now, you're assigned to C Block. General population. That's a death sentence. Then I'd advise you not to die, he said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. The walk to C Block was a gauntlet. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, despair, and stale food. Inmates watched her from their cells, their eyes lingering. It was the universal stare of predators sizing up new, unexpected prey. Her guard, a wiry man with tired eyes, stopped at cell C-47. Your new home. Inside was a single bunk and a man who seemed to have been carved from a mountain. He was massive, covered in prison tattoos, his muscles straining the seams of his jumpsuit. He was doing push-ups, the floor groaning under his weight. He looked up as the door buzzed open, and his eyes, small and hard, raked over Zara. What the hell is this? He grunted, his voice a low rumble. New cellmate. Name's Beast, the guard said, already walking away. Try not to kill her on the first night. The cell door slid shut, the lock engaging with a deafening thud. Zara stood her ground, her body language neutral, her senses on high alert. Beast rose slowly to his full height, towering over her. He circled her, sniffing the air like an animal. They're giving me women now. Fresh meat. Establish dominance early, her training whispered. Project strength, even when you have none. I get the bunk, Zara said, her voice cutting through his bravado. You sleep on the floor. Beast stopped circling. He blinked, surprised by her tone. Then he laughed, a deep, ugly sound. You got jokes. I like that. It'll make breaking you more fun. He took a step closer, invading her personal space, his breath foul. Zara didn't flinch. She met his gaze with the same dead-eyed stare she had used on captured warlords. I sleep light, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was more menacing than a shout. If you touch me while I'm sleeping, you won't wake up. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not fear, but confusion. A dawning awareness that the prey might not be prey at all. Hundreds of miles away, in a penthouse office overlooking a sparkling city, Vincent Caruso poured himself a glass of scotch. His secure phone buzzed. A text message from a blocked number. Package delivered. He smiled, taking a slow sip. He pictured Zara Kenyatta, the brilliant, righteous soldier who had cost him billions and his reputation, now trapped in a cage with monsters. He had made a few calls, moved some money around, and the gears of a corrupt system had turned beautifully. A quick call to Warden Styles confirmed it. "She's in general population, Mr. Caruso." As requested, Styles had assured him. "The beast has his new roommate." "Excellent," Caruso said. "See to it that she has a memorable stay." He hung up and swirled the amber liquid in his glass, toasting the reflection of the city lights. Justice, he mused, was simply a matter of having the resources to create your own. Colonel James Morrison, his office at Fort Bragg overlooking a training field, stared at the file on his desk. It was a preliminary report on Zara Kenyatta's conviction. Treason. Espionage. The charges were so ludicrous, so contrary to the character of the woman he had mentored for over a decade, that they felt like a personal insult. Zara was the most honorable soldier he had ever known. She had volunteered for the most dangerous missions, led her teams with unparalleled courage, and held herself to a code that made most men look like boys. He made a call. "Richardson," he said, his voice tight. "I need you to find someone for me." Staff Sergeant Zara Kenyatta, retired. "The system says she was transferred to the federal facility at Fort Worth last week. But I called them. They have no record of her. Find her. Use any resources you need. This stinks to high heaven." Richardson, his former intelligence sergeant, knew what that meant. Go dark. Go quiet. Use the off-the-books networks. Back at Helios, the sun was a hammer. In the main recreation yard, 150 men moved in orbits of racial and gang affiliation. The dust kicked up by their feet hung in the air like a permanent haze. Zara kept to the perimeter, walking a steady lap, her eyes constantly scanning, mapping sight lines, identifying potential weapons, noting the guards' patrol patterns. She was an island in a sea of violent men. They watched her, their whispers following her like flies. On her third day, the confrontation she knew was coming finally arrived. A man named Stinger, the wiry, cruel leader of the prison's most dominant gang, the Scorpions, stepped into her path. He was flanked by two of his heavily muscled lieutenants. "Well, look what we have here," Stinger said, a mocking grin on his face. The yard went quiet. Every conversation stopped. Every game paused. This was theater, and everyone was watching. "Heard you were some kind of hotshot. Think you're better than us?" Zara stopped walking. She kept her hands loose at her sides, her posture relaxed but ready. "I'm just trying to serve my time." "No, see, the problem is you're serving it here," Stinger sneered. "In my yard. And I don't like new things. Especially things that don't show respect." He nodded to one of his men. The man lunged, a clumsy, telegraphed move meant to intimidate. It was a fatal mistake. 15 years of Delta Force close-quarters combat training took over. Zara's mind didn't think, her body simply reacted. She pivoted on the ball of her foot, letting the man's momentum carry him past her. As he did, she drove the point of her elbow into the nerve cluster behind his ear. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed into the dust, unconscious before he hit the ground. The second man, stunned by the speed, pulled a shiv from his waistband. Zara was already moving inside his reach. She deflected his arm, grabbed his wrist, and applied a sharp, twisting pressure. There was a sickening pop as his shoulder dislocated. He screamed and dropped the shiv. Stinger, his grin gone, stared in disbelief. He had expected fear, tears, begging. He got surgical, silent violence. He tried to back away, but Zara closed the distance. She didn't hit him. She didn't need to. She simply stood in front of him, her eyes boring into his. "You were saying something about respect?" she asked, her voice calm and level. Stinger trembled, a mixture of rage and a new, unfamiliar feeling, fear. He looked at his two men, downed in less than 5 seconds, and then back at the woman standing before him. The yard was utterly silent. You could hear the wind whistling through the razor wire. Then, from the far side of the yard, someone started to clap. A slow, mocking applause. The spell was broken. Guards were running, whistles shrieking, but the message had been sent. This wasn't just a new inmate. This was a new predator. And the prison's ecosystem had just been violently rearranged. The news of the yard fight spread through Helios like a wildfire. Zara had become a legend overnight, the woman who had taken down 3 of Stinger's top enforcers without breaking a sweat. It earned her a sliver of space. Inmates gave her a wider berth. The whispers didn't stop, but now they were tinged with fear instead of just predatory curiosity. But respect in prison is a double-edged sword. For Stinger and his scorpions, it was a public humiliation they could not let stand. For Warden Styles and his benefactor, Vincent Caruso, it was an unwelcome complication. She fought back. Caruso's voice was cold with disbelief over the secure line to the warden's office. She was supposed to be broken. She's more resilient than we anticipated, Styles admitted, sweating in his air-conditioned office. Then increase the pressure, Caruso commanded. I want her gone. I don't care how you do it. Put a price on her head. A substantial one. Enough to make even the most cautious inmate take a chance. I want every man in that facility to see her as a walking lottery ticket. The bounty was set at $100,000. In a place where a man would kill for a carton of cigarettes, it was a king's ransom. Word spread through the guards, then to the gang leaders, and then to the general population. The invisible perimeter of fear around Zara vanished, replaced by a suffocating ring of greed. Now, every inmate's gaze held a new, terrifying light. They weren't just sizing her up, they were calculating her worth. C.O. Ellis, one of the few guards who hadn't had his soul corroded by the desert heat and the prison's corruption, found Zara during her work detail in the laundry. He was an older man, close to retirement, with sad, tired eyes. Kenyatta, he said quietly, pretending to inspect a pile of sheets. You need to watch your back. All the time. They put money on you. Big money. I appreciate the warning, Ellis, she said, not missing a beat in her folding. This ain't a warning. It's a eulogy, he replied grimly. No one's gonna help you. The warden wants this. You're on your own. That night, the real test came. The cell was dark, the only light a pale moonbeam filtering through the high, barred window. Zara lay on her bunk, feigning sleep, every muscle coiled. She had known Beast, her hulking cellmate, wouldn't be able to resist the bounty. She heard him shift, then the soft scrape of his feet hitting the concrete floor. He was moving with a stealth that surprised her, a predator in his natural element. He reached her bunk, his massive shadow falling over her. She could smell the sour sweat of his anticipation. His hand reached for her. Zara exploded. She drove her knee upward into his groin with the force of a piston. As he doubled over with a strangled gasp, she rolled off the bunk, landing silently on her feet. He was hurt, but his size and rage made him dangerous. He lunged, his hands like shovels, trying to grab her, to crush her. Zara didn't meet his force with force. She used his momentum against him. She sidestepped, grabbed his outstretched arm, and pivoted, driving him headfirst into the concrete wall. The sound was a sickening, wet crack. Beast crumpled to the floor, a broken heap. The cell door buzzed open. C.O. Ellis stood there with another guard, his face grim. He'd clearly been waiting, listening. He took in the scene, Beast unconscious and bleeding on the floor, Zara standing over him, breathing heavily but unharmed. He attacked me, Zara said simply. I know, Ellis said. He looked down at the mountain of a man on the floor. Attempted assault on another inmate. He's going to the hole for a long time. As they dragged Beast's unconscious body out of the cell, Ellis paused. That was smart, waiting for him to make the first move. It's the only way to survive in here, Zara replied. Maybe, Ellis said, shaking his head. But with 100 grand on your head, surviving the night is one thing. Surviving the week is another. He left her alone in the cell, the silence deeper and more menacing than before. She had won the battle, but she knew the war was just beginning. Colonel Morrison slammed the phone down, his frustration a palpable force in his office. Every official channel was a dead end. Zara Kenyatta's files were sealed under a national security flag. The Bureau of Prisons claimed she was in transit, a ghost in their system. The official story was a bureaucratic nightmare, but Morrison knew better. This was a deliberate, professionally executed disappearance. "They're stonewalling us, Richardson," he said over a secure video link. "Which means we're on the right track." "I've been digging into Caruso Aerospace, sir," Richardson replied, his face grim on the monitor. "The man has connections everywhere. Political donations, ex-military on his board, shell corporations, he's a ghost, too." "Then we stop playing by their rules," Morrison declared. His voice dropped, taking on the tone he used when planning missions that the world would never know about. "I'm making a call to JSOC. We have a soldier behind enemy lines. We're going to plan a non-standard extraction." "Sir, that's an act of war against a federal facility." "They declared war when they took one of my people," Morrison countered. "Get me a team ready. We're going in." Inside Helios, the pressure was becoming unbearable. The bounty had turned the prison into a pressure cooker. Gangs that were once sworn enemies were now seen in quiet, tense negotiations. Stinger, his authority restored by the promise of Caruso's money, was building a coalition. Zara could feel the eyes on her everywhere, in the chow hall, in the yard, during her work detail. The air was thick with conspiracy. She was completely isolated, a target with a countdown timer floating over her head. Her military training had prepared her for combat, but it hadn't prepared her for this kind of psychological warfare, the constant, grinding certainty that everyone around her was a potential killer, waiting for the right moment. The fear was a cold, heavy thing in her gut. Not the sharp adrenaline of a firefight, but the slow, corrosive dread of a hopeless situation. One evening, C.O. Ellis slipped by her cell during his rounds. When he was sure no one was looking, he slid a small, metallic object through the bars. It was no bigger than a thumb drive. "What is this?" Zara whispered, concealing it in her palm. "Military-grade emergency beacon," Ellis hissed, his eyes darting down the corridor. "I acquired it a long time ago. It sends a secure, encrypted burst to a specific satellite frequency. If things go sideways, really sideways, press the button. It won't bring help in time, but it'll leave a record. It'll show them where you were when it happened." It was a final act of decency from a man in an impossible position. A beacon for a ghost. "Why are you doing this, Ellis?" Zara asked. "I've got a daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's about your age. I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing." He moved on before she could thank him. The very next day, the whispers solidified into a concrete plan. She overheard two inmates talking in the laundry. "Tomorrow. During the shift change. They're gonna start a riot in here. Stinger's got everyone on board. The guards are being paid to look the other way. They're going to corner her among the machines." A riot in the industrial laundry. It was the perfect kill box. Loud, chaotic, filled with potential weapons and blind spots. Her death could easily be written off as a tragic accident, another casualty of prison violence. That night, Zara sat on her bunk, the small beacon clutched in her hand. Hope was a dangerous luxury, but the small device was a tangible link to the world she had been stolen from. Outside, Colonel Morrison was moving heaven and earth. Inside, Zara Kenyatta, Delta Force commander, prepared for her last stand. The industrial laundry at Helios was a cavern of steam and steel. The roar of the massive washing machines and the hiss of the hot presses created a deafening, disorienting wall of sound. It was here, during the morning shift change when the guard presence was at its thinnest, that the Scorpions made their move. It started with a staged fight at the far end of the room, a diversion. As the two guards on duty rushed toward it, Stinger and a dozen of his hand-picked killers sealed the exits. The trap was sprung. The vast, chaotic room became Zara's tomb. "Nowhere to run, soldier," Stinger yelled over the din, a cruel smile on his face. He and his men advanced, a closing net of shivs, pipes, and makeshift clubs. But Zara wasn't running. She was assessing. The environment was her only ally. She kicked over a large cart of wet, heavy jumpsuits, creating a barrier. As two attackers scrambled over it, she yanked a high-pressure hot water hose from its fitting, spraying a jet of scalding water into their faces. They screamed, blinded and burned. She moved like a ghost through the steam, using the massive machinery for cover. An attacker lunged from behind a dryer. She met him with a heavy iron pipe she pried from a railing, a solid blow to his kneecap that sent him crashing down. Another came at her from the side, and she shoved him backward into a massive laundry press. His arm was caught, and the machine's piston crushed it with sickening finality. She was a whirlwind of controlled, efficient violence. But there were too many. For every one she took down, two more took his place. A pipe glanced off her shoulder, sending a shock of pain down her arm. A fist caught her high on the cheekbone, and her vision swam. They were boxing her in, her back against a row of roaring dryers, the heat scorching her jumpsuit. Stinger pushed through his men, a long, sharpened piece of rebar in his hand. "You've been a real pain in the ass," he snarled, his eyes alight with victory. "But it ends now." She was exhausted, bleeding, her energy fading. This was it. The mathematical certainty of being overwhelmed. Her hand went to the pocket where she had hidden the beacon. Her thumb found the button. At that exact moment, a series of concussive bangs echoed from the entrance, a sound that cut through even the laundry's roar. Flash bangs. The attackers, blinded and disoriented, stumbled back. Through the now open doors, a new group of men poured in. They weren't prison guards. They moved with the fluid, silent precision of apex predators. They wore black tactical gear, carried M4 rifles, and had no insignia. JSOC. Federal agents. On the ground, now, a voice boomed through a megaphone, a voice Zara knew better than her own. "Colonel Morrison." Stinger stared in disbelief, his moment of triumph shattered. He turned his rage on Zara, lunging with the rebar. "If I'm going down, you're coming with me." Zara, given a precious second by the chaos, dodged the clumsy attack. She grabbed his arm, used his forward momentum, and twisted. He flew over her hip and slammed into the concrete floor. Before he could recover, a black boot was on his neck, and a rifle was pointed at his head. The raid was over in 90 seconds. Stinger and his surviving men were zip-tied on the floor. Zara stood, bruised and bleeding, amidst the steam and the silence, and looked at her commanding officer. "A little late, Colonel," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "Fashionably so, Commander," Morrison replied, his eyes filled with immense relief. "Let's go home." The aftermath was swift and decisive. Armed with the beacon's location data and Zara's testimony, federal investigators dismantled Vincent Caruso's empire. He and Warden Stiles were arrested, along with a dozen guards from Helios. The ensuing scandal led to sweeping reforms in the private prison industry. Zara was exonerated, her name and rank restored with full honors. But she couldn't go back to the life she'd had before. The woman who had walked out of Helios was not the same one who had walked in. She had seen the machine from the inside, seen how easily justice could be perverted by money and power. 6 months later, she stood before a graduating class of West Point cadets, not as a soldier, but as a civilian. Her testimony had been instrumental in passing the Veterans Justice and Protection Act. She had started a foundation dedicated to providing legal aid to wrongfully convicted veterans. Your duty does not end when you take off the uniform, she told the sea of young, hopeful faces. Your greatest battles may be fought not on foreign soil, but right here, in the defense of the very ideals this nation is supposed to represent. Fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. That is the highest form of service. Her new mission had just begun. This time, she wasn't fighting for a government or a flag. She was fighting for ghosts, for the countless men and women trapped in the system she had so narrowly escaped. She was their commander now. This story is a testament to resilience and the fight for justice. What part of Zara's journey moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a meaningful conversation, and please, remember to comment with respect for everyone's perspective. If you found this story compelling, hit that like button, share it with a friend, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.